This is Nanny, and I am going to show you how to knit your first row. Our last lesson showed how to cast on stitches, and we now have 10 stitches. So just to remind you, this is teaching with the continental method, which is holding the yarn in your left hand. We've got the ball of yarn on the left, we've got the tail end on the right. Now if you have a very long tail, if you use a piece of yarn and you have very long tail, you don't need it to be long. You can always clip it to about 6 or 8 inches. Don't clip it way up here because you're going to need to do something with this yarn when you're finished. But if it's really, really long, it gets annoying and gets tangled up and gets in the way. Alright, so to begin, you're holding the yarn with the stitches on it in your left hand. You're holding the needle with the stitches on it in your left hand. You're holding the needle with no stitches on it in your right hand. And the ball of yarn is to your left. Now, just to remind you how you hold the yarn, you put your hand face up, you loop the yarn around your baby finger, under your next 2 fingers, and then over your index finger. Now, to do the first stitch, the first row, to knit your first row, you also have to hold the needle with the stitches in your left hand. So, this is how you hold it. I want to just point out to you a couple things. One is, you notice that my finger is kind of lifted up. It's not on the top of the needle. It's lifted up. So you have this stretch of maybe 1 inch of yarn like that. Secondly, my thumb is resting on the top stitch on the needle. That's important because you don't want these stitches to go flying off the end of the needle before you're ready. You control where that first stitch is with your thumb, and you control the tension of the yarn with this finger. So we're holding the left needle with the stitches on it with our left hand. This one has nothing on it yet. Oftentimes in the beginning I'll hold the tail end of the stitch of the yarn with my my baby finger and my ring finger just to kind of control where the tension is of the stitch. You don't have to do that, I just find it easier. Okay, now to make your first stitch, what you're going to do is you're going to take your empty right needle, and I need to tell you that the first stitch is the hardest stitch. After you get that first stitch done, you're home free. Because this first stitch tends to be a little bit tight. So what I do is I stick the needle in there and just loosen it up a little bit. Sometimes I have to loosen it up from the back a little bit. Just loosen it up so you can get your whole needle in there. Now, my right first finger, I'm going to hold right here just to control the stitch. You notice that I have moved my thumb down onto the next stitch. So I've got my right first finger here. Now in this first stitch, you're going to need to use your left middle finger to kind of help guide that stitch, the yarn that's on your left hand, so that you can pull it out. I don't know if you can see that, but here's the point of the right needle. Here's my middle finger guiding that yarn, and you're going to grab that stitch, that yarn from behind, pull it through, and then once you've pulled it through, pull the loop off the needle. There's your first stitch. Look at that. So now you have 1 stitch on the right hand needle, everything else is on the left. So the first stitch was the hardest. This one's not so bad. You put your needle through from front to back, grab that bit of yarn, pull it off the needle. Front to back, grab the yarn with the needle and pull it off the left needle. Front to back with the right needle, grab the yarn, pull it forward, off the needle. Front to back, there's the yarn, grab it, pull it off. Now you notice while I'm doing this, I've got my thumb controlling the stitches on the needle. I've got my finger kind of up in the air here, away from the needle, not down like this, that's too tight. You've got all this, you get confused, all this yarn is kind of flopping in the breeze. You want it to be tight enough, far enough away, but with some tension, like a guitar string tension or a rubber band, so that you know exactly where that yarn is and you can control it. So front to back, use your middle finger to help you out if you need to, and then pull it off. Front to back, middle finger, pull it off. Now here's what's happening. See how the yarn is kind of gradually going down this finger? I'm losing control. When that happens, and it will happen, happens all the time, you just shake out. Your fingers get kind of tense. You just shake out your fingers, let the yarn go. Hold on to your needles if you need to put them on the table so that the stitches don't fall off. That's okay. Pick them back up again, and let's redo the yarn around our hand. Just as a reminder, palm up, yarn around the baby finger, under your next two fingers, over your pointer finger, and hold your thumb on this stitch, hold your pointer finger up like that, and now we're good to go again. So front to back, pull this, front to back, pull the stitch through. Now you notice that there's a little bit of extra yarn here between the right and the left needle. Don't worry about that. That's all going to go away. But be careful. Don't accidentally stick your needle in there, because that's not a stitch. The stitches are all on this needle. They're not in between the needles. So don't be confused by this. That's not a stitch. This is where the stitch is. This is all the good stuff on the left side, left needle. So using my middle finger, pull it off, front to back, grab the yarn, and then pull it off. Voila! All the stitches are now on the right hand needle, and the left hand needle is empty. So you've done your first row of knit stitches. To do your second row of knit stitches, you're going to switch hands. Well, switch needles. So you put the empty needle in your right hand, you put the needle with all the stitches in your left hand. Make sure that you've got it set up so that the yarn that's connected to the ball of yarn is at the top. It should be there. If it's not, then something went wrong. So our next row, we're going to do another knit row. Same thing, exact same thing. Again, the first stitch, make sure that you get the first stitch on the needle. Don't be confused by this little bit of loop here. That's not a stitch, this little floppy thing. This always happens in the beginning. You get this little floppy thing. That's not a stitch. Your stitch is on the needle. So, again, put your needle from front to back. Use your middle finger to help guide the yarn. There you go. So I just wanted to show you also, as you're going along, I've been doing this kind of slowly, but as you're going along, you get a little faster. And this is still pretty slow, but when you get good at this, you can go really, really fast. So it's the same motion over and over again. You're putting your needle from the front to the back, grabbing the yarn, pulling it out. All you're doing is making loops. That's what knitting is. You're making loops. You're going through one loop, getting a yarn, creating another loop. So front to back, grab the yarn, stitch off the needle. Notice I'm always using my thumb to control the top stitch, always using my pointer finger to control the tension of the yarn. Always have this little C shape here. Don't squeeze the C. Don't make it collapse. This always should be kind of like a C. So front to back, pull the yarn through. Front to back, pull the yarn through. Now that we're done with these two rows, I want to show you something. We've got bumps. I don't know if you can see that. I think we need to knit a little bit more, and I'll show you that. Okay, I'll knit a bit more, and then I'll come back.